Most people believe that if something is seriously wrong with their body, they would feel it. Pain, pressure, a clear signal that something isn't right. That's what we're taught to expect. But after 60, the body doesn't always send loud warnings anymore. It becomes quieter, slower, more subtle. And that's exactly why so many problems are missed. Because the damage doesn't begin with something dramatic. It begins with something small, something ordinary, something you've probably already done today. In fact, some of the most dangerous changes inside the body don't come from a single bad decision. They come from repeated patterns, tiny habits, daily routines, things that feel completely harmless, even responsible. And here's the part that surprises most people when they hear it. These habits don't feel like mistakes. They feel normal. They feel safe. Sometimes they even feel healthy. You wake up. You move through your morning the way you always have. You follow the same rhythm, the same choices, the same small actions that have become automatic over the years. Nothing seems wrong. Nothing feels urgent. But underneath that surface, your body is responding, slowly, quietly, and very consistently. Your blood sugar rises and falls in ways you don't notice. Your muscles begin to weaken from patterns that seem insignificant. Your circulation changes depending on how you spend your first hours of the day. Your heart, your joints, even your brain are all adapting to what you repeatedly do. And here's the real danger. Because it happens gradually, you don't feel the shift when it starts. There's no clear moment where something breaks. There's just a slow movement in the wrong direction. Until one day, something feels off. You're more tired than usual. Your balance isn't as steady. Your energy drops earlier in the day. Or your doctor mentions something you didn't expect. And it feels sudden. But it wasn't. It was building, quietly, day after day. I've seen this pattern more times than I can count. People who were careful, responsible, doing their best to take care of themselves. And yet, when we look deeper, the cause was almost never something rare or complex. It was routine, simple behaviors repeated over time, pushing the body just slightly out of balance. Not enough to notice in one day, but more than enough to matter over months and years. That's why today's video is so important, because I'm going to show you 7 everyday habits that quietly damage your body after 60. 7 things that don't look dangerous, but over time can affect your strength, your energy, your metabolism, and even your long-term health. And here's what you need to pay attention to. Most people don't just have one of these habits. They have several, 3, 4, sometimes even more, happening in the same day, stacking together, reinforcing each other, making the impact stronger without you realizing it. And one of these habits, the one people dismiss the fastest, usually happens within the first hour after waking up. It feels so normal that almost no one questions it. But once you see it, you won't look at your morning the same way again. Let's start with that one. Habit number 1 happens so early in the day that most people never question it. In fact, many believe they're doing the right thing. They wake up and they don't eat enough protein in the morning, or they skip it entirely. Maybe it's just tea and toast, maybe a small piece of bread, a biscuit, something light, or sometimes nothing at all. I'm not that hungry. I'll eat later. I've always done it this way. It feels harmless. But after 60, this one habit quietly begins to work against your body. Because overnight, your body has already been in a fasting state for many hours. Your muscles haven't received nutrients. Your blood sugar is more sensitive, and your metabolism is not as flexible as it used to be. So what happens next is subtle, but important. Without enough protein in the morning, your body doesn't get the signal it needs to maintain muscle. Instead, it begins to break it down, very slowly, very quietly, day after day. And most people don't notice it until something changes. They feel weaker when they stand up. They get tired earlier in the day. Simple tasks feel just a little heavier than before, and they think, this is just aging. But often, it's not. It's the result of what happens in those first hours after waking up. And there's something else. When breakfast is mostly carbohydrates, bread, your blood sugar rises quickly, then it drops. And that drop can leave you feeling tired, foggy, even slightly shaky. So by midday, your energy is already unstable. And many people respond the same way. They reach for something quick, more sugar, more simple carbs, another cup of tea with something sweet, and the cycle continues. This is how a quiet pattern forms. Low protein, muscle loss, unstable energy, more cravings, more imbalance. Not in one day, but over time, it adds up. I remember one patient, a man in his late 60s. He told me he felt fine overall, but noticed he was getting weaker. Nothing dramatic, just small things. Getting up from a chair took more effort. Carrying groceries felt heavier. He assumed it was just age. But when we looked at his routine, his mornings were always the same. Tea, bread, sometimes nothing at all. Once he changed just that one habit, adding a proper source of protein in the morning. Eggs, yogurt, even a small portion of protein-rich food. Within weeks, his energy improved. He felt more stable, stronger, more alert, not because of a medication, but because he stopped quietly working against his own body. And that's the key idea here. After 60, the body doesn't need extreme changes. It needs consistent support, and the morning is where that support begins. Now here's the part most people don't expect. Even if you think your breakfast is light and healthy, it might still be triggering this exact problem. And the next habit makes that effect even worse, without most people realizing it. Habit number 2 often happens right after breakfast, and it feels completely natural. You eat, and then you sit down. Maybe you turn on the TV, maybe you check your phone, maybe you just rest for a while. It feels deserved, comfortable, even healthy. But after 60, this simple habit can quietly affect your body more than most people realize. Because what you do in the minutes after eating plays a direct role in how your body handles that meal. When you stay seated, especially for a longer period of time, your muscles are inactive, and that matters, because your muscles are one of the main systems that help regulate blood sugar. When they're not moving, your body has a harder time using the glucose from your meal efficiently. So instead, your blood sugar rises higher than it should, and stays elevated longer than it should. You don't feel it happening. There's no immediate signal. But inside, your system is working harder than necessary. And over time, this pattern can contribute to fatigue, weight gain, and metabolic imbalance. Now here's where it connects directly to the first habit. If your breakfast was already low in protein or high in simple carbohydrates, this effect becomes even stronger. Higher spike, stronger drop, more instability. And once again, most people don't notice it in the moment. They notice it later. That sudden dip in energy, that need to sit down again, that feeling of heaviness, even after a small meal. And it creates a loop. Eat, sit, feel sluggish, move less, feel weaker, day after day. I remember a woman in her early 70s who described this perfectly. She said, "Every time I eat, I just feel like I need to sit. I don't have the energy to move." She thought the food was making her tired, but it wasn't the food alone. It was what happened after. Once she started doing something very simple, just standing, walking slowly, even for 5 to 10 minutes after meals, everything changed. Her energy became more stable. She didn't feel that heavy drop anymore. And perhaps most importantly, she felt more in control of her body again. That's the shift we're looking for. Not extreme effort, not exercise routines, just small, intentional movement at the right time. Because after 60, timing matters more than intensity. And what you do right after eating is one of those moments that quietly shapes your health. Now here's something even more surprising. Many people try to fix these feelings, the fatigue, the discomfort, the stiffness, by doing something that seems helpful, but actually creates a much bigger problem over time. And that brings us to the next habit. Habit number 3 doesn't look like a problem at all. In fact, it looks like a solution, a responsible one. You feel a little pain, a bit of stiffness, maybe pressure in your joints or back, and you take something to make it go away. A pain reliever, something mild, something you've used before. It works. The discomfort fades, and you move on with your day. Simple, effective. But here's what most people don't realize. When this becomes a daily habit, it can quietly create a much bigger problem. Because pain, in many cases, is not the problem itself. It's a signal, a message from your body that something needs attention, Something needs to change. But when that signal is constantly suppressed, the underlying issue doesn't go away. It continues, silently, and sometimes it gets worse. Now, after 60, this becomes even more important because the body's ability to recover is different. Inflammation can last longer. Small imbalances can turn into larger ones more easily. And certain medications, even common ones, can begin to affect other systems. The stomach, the kidneys, the cardiovascular system, not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, over time. And this is where the pattern becomes dangerous. You feel discomfort, you take something, the feeling disappears, you continue the same behavior. Nothing changes, except the problem underneath. I once spoke with a man who had been dealing with knee discomfort for years. Nothing severe, just enough to notice. He told me, I just take something when it bothers me. It's not a big deal. And for a long time, it wasn't. Until one day, the discomfort became limitation. Walking became harder. Standing for long periods became uncomfortable. And when we look back, the signs had been there all along, but they had been covered. Quietly, consistently, and that's the risk. Not that occasional use is dangerous, but that repeated use can disconnect you from what your body is trying to tell you. And over time, that disconnect can cost you strength, mobility, and awareness. Because after 60, awareness is everything. Your body gives you signals, small ones, subtle ones. And the earlier you respond to them, the easier it is to correct course. But when those signals are muted, ignored, or delayed, the correction becomes harder. Now here's something even more interesting. Many people who rely on this habit also struggle with something else, something they often dismiss as just poor sleep, but it's actually connected to what's happening inside the body during the night. And that brings us to the next habit. Habit number 4 is something many people don't even consider a habit. They see it as normal, just part of getting older, sleeping poorly, and doing nothing about it. Waking up during the night, tossing and turning, getting up to use the bathroom, once, twice, sometimes more. Waking up in the morning, not fully rested, but still continuing the day as usual. It's just age. Everyone sleeps like this. I can manage. And for a long time, it seems manageable. But after 60, poor sleep is not just about feeling tired. It directly affects how your body repairs itself. Because during sleep, especially deep sleep, your body does critical work. It restores muscle, balances hormones, supports brain function, regulates inflammation, and when that process is interrupted, even slightly, night after night, those systems don't function the way they should. Not in one night, but over time, the effect builds. Your muscles don't recover as well. Your energy becomes less stable. Your memory and focus begin to feel different, and your body stays in a slightly elevated stress state, longer than it should. Now here's the part that most people miss. They focus on how long they sleep, but not on how well they sleep. You can be in bed for 7 or even 8 hours, but if your sleep is fragmented, shallow, constantly interrupted, your body doesn't get the full benefit, and the next day, you carry that with you. You feel it in small ways. Slower movement, less motivation, a subtle sense of fatigue that never fully goes away. And over time, this becomes your new normal. But it wasn't always like that. I remember speaking with a woman who said, I sleep enough. I just don't feel rested anymore. And that one sentence captured everything. Because she wasn't lacking time in bed. She was lacking recovery. Once she started paying attention to her sleep quality, making small changes, her energy began to shift. Not overnight, but gradually, steadily, and that's the key. Sleep doesn't need to be perfect, but it cannot be ignored, because when sleep quality drops, everything else becomes harder. Your body has less resilience, and that makes every other habit on this list more damaging. Now here's something even more surprising. Some people try to compensate for this low energy during the day by turning to foods that they believe are helping them, but are actually pushing their body further out of balance. And that leads directly into the next habit. Habit number 5 is one of the most misunderstood because it hides behind something that looks healthy. In fact, many people are convinced this habit is helping them. They choose foods they believe are good. Light, natural, easy to digest. Things like fruit in the morning, juices, biscuits labeled as healthy. Even certain cereals or simple snacks throughout the day. It feels like a smart choice, a careful choice. But after 60, the body responds differently to these foods, especially when they are consumed alone, without balance. Because many of these light options are quickly absorbed. They enter the bloodstream fast, and that causes a rapid rise in blood sugar. Again, you don't feel it immediately. There's no alarm. But shortly after, there's a drop. And that drop is what people notice. Sudden fatigue, a dip in energy, a need to sit down or eat something again. And this is where the cycle repeats. Quick energy, quick drop, more cravings, another quick fix. It feels like your body needs more food. But in reality, it needs more stability. Now here's where it becomes even more important. After 60, the body becomes less efficient at managing these fluctuations. So the spikes become sharper, the drops become more noticeable, and the recovery takes longer, which means your energy throughout the day becomes less predictable, more fragile. And over time, this doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects your metabolism, your weight, your overall balance. I remember a man who told me, "I eat very light during the day, but I'm always tired." When we looked at what light meant, it was mostly quick carbohydrates, fruit alone, tea with something sweet, small snacks, but no real structure. Once he started combining those foods with something more stable, a source of protein, a bit of fat, his energy changed. He didn't feel those sharp drops anymore. He didn't need constant snacks. And most importantly, he stopped feeling like his body was unpredictable. That's the shift. Not eating less, not eating more, but eating in a way that keeps your system steady. Because after 60, stability matters more than speed. And many healthy habits are actually working against that stability. Now here's something even more subtle. Even when people improve their food and try to stay active, there's one basic thing they still overlook every single day. Something so simple that it's almost invisible. But when it's missing, the entire system feels it. And that brings us to the next habit. Habit number 6 is so simple that most people overlook it completely. Not drinking enough water, especially in the first half of the day. Now, if you ask most people, they'll say, "Of course I drink water. A cup of tea in the morning, maybe coffee, something with meals. It feels like enough." But here's the problem. After 60, the body's sense of thirst becomes less reliable. You don't always feel thirsty, even when your body actually needs fluids. So you don't drink, because there's no signal telling you to. And that creates a quiet form of dehydration. Not severe, not obvious, but enough to affect how your body functions. Because water is involved in almost everything. Circulation, joint lubrication, digestion, temperature regulation, even mental clarity. And when you don't get enough, small things begin to change. Your energy feels lower. Your movements feel slightly stiffer. Your head feels a bit heavier, less clear. Sometimes there's even a sense of fatigue that you can't fully explain. And most people don't connect it to water. They think it's age, or sleep, or just one of those days. But here's what's really happening. When the body is slightly dehydrated, blood becomes a bit thicker. Circulation is less efficient. Oxygen and nutrients don't move as smoothly as they should. And that affects how everything feels, from your muscles to your brain. Now combine that with the previous habits. Low protein in the morning, sitting after meals, unstable blood sugar, poor sleep, and now, not enough hydration. Each one adds a small layer, and together, they amplify each other. That's how the system slowly moves out of balance, not because of one big mistake, but because of several small ones, happening at the same time. I remember a man who told me he felt constantly low on energy, not exhausted, just never fully on. When we looked at his day, he was barely drinking water, mostly tea, a bit of coffee, very little plain water. Once he made a simple change, just starting his day with water and continuing steadily through the morning, he noticed something interesting. His energy didn't spike, it stabilized. He felt more clear, less heavy, more consistent, and that's the key word again, consistency. Because after 60, Your body doesn't respond well to extremes. It responds to steady support, and water is one of the simplest forms of that support. Now here's the final habit, and this one is different because it's not about what you do, it's about what you ignore, a pattern that almost everyone falls into at some point. And it's often the reason why the other 6 habits go unnoticed for so long. Let's look at that one. Habit number 7 is the one that ties everything together, and in many ways, it's the most dangerous because it's not something you do, it's something you ignore. Ignoring the small signals your body gives you and calling them just aging. A little fatigue, a bit of weakness, slight dizziness when you stand up, less energy than before, poor sleep, small discomforts that come and go. Individually, none of these seem serious. They don't stop your day. They don't force you to take action, so it's easy to dismiss them. It's normal. I'm getting older. It happens to everyone. And for a while, that explanation feels enough. But here's the reality. Your body is always communicating with you. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently. Every small change, every subtle shift is information. And after 60, those signals become even more important. Because the earlier you notice them, the easier it is to respond, to adjust, to correct direction. But when they're ignored, delayed, or explained away, they don't disappear. They continue. They build quietly. And this is where everything connects. Low energy in the morning, unstable blood sugar, sitting too much, poor sleep, lack of hydration. Each of these habits creates small signals, and habit number 7 is choosing not to listen to them. I remember a patient who once told me, "I thought it was nothing until it wasn't." That sentence stays with me because it captures exactly how these patterns work. Nothing feels urgent until something changes. And by that point, the body has already been trying to tell you for a long time. That's why awareness matters more than anything else. Not perfection, not strict routines, just awareness, paying attention to what your body is showing you, day after day. Because when you notice early, you have options. You can make small adjustments. You can support your body before problems grow. You stay in control. But when you ignore those signals, you give that control away. And that's the difference. These 7 habits are not dramatic. They don't look dangerous. But together, they quietly shape how your body feels, how it functions, and how it ages. The good news is, they can also be changed. Not all at once, not perfectly, but step by step. And it starts with something simple. Noticing what you're doing and how your body responds to it. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's where real change begins. If you want more clear, practical videos like this, the kind that help you notice what most people miss after 60, stay with us. Because sometimes the most important warnings are the ones that don't feel urgent until it's too late.